What is real freedom?
The condition of freedom is the absence of slavery. Freedom includes infinite possibility, including the possibility of chaos that may attempt to limit freedom, your freedom. The ability to live your life as you so choose, since it belongs to you. That is real freedom. Freedom, however, is not free. It is your property. Therefore, it is your responsibility to understand ownership and be responsible for your own freedom. If you own it, if you are supposed to have freedom, if you see that freedom is that essential, as we do see time and time again in history, otherwise we have slavery and democide and war. Freedom, being a birthright property, is therefore natural and destined for your own life. You must own your own freedom by knowing how to manifest and maintain it. Any voluntary interaction is a freedom based interaction. The exercise of rights is the exercise of freedom. Now, it's saying that when we're saying that any voluntary interaction is a freedom-based interaction, let it also be known though that if you're voluntarily handing away your freedom, then itself, if you're giving away your freedom itself, then obviously it's not a freedom-based interaction. Just wanted to make that disclaimer. But let's break this down a little bit more. Aaron, what is real freedom, and how do you like to look at it?
Well, I think it's always usually a pretty simple way to say, freedom is anything that does not object or, limit anyone else's freedom. As long as it's a moral right, I guess we'll get into that a little more. But, you know, your freedom is only limited to limiting someone else's freedom. So it's any action that does not cause harm to another sentient being.
Mhm. And see how we're kind of connecting these points back and forth between inequality, equality, freedom, real freedom, and we did define what a right is before, and we provide multiple different perspectives on that. And even if you don't accept the whole premises of rights, if you can understand the general context of what they're to represent, they're representing a sense of ownership, the fact that you own yourself or own what you are supposed to have, something that you are naturally intended to have, your purpose in this life to be free and to not be coerced against your own will. So, if you're saying that is how humans are supposed to live their life, you're claiming that this is some sort of right that everybody should have, a right that is born with them in their nature that makes it so that it's a universal goal. It's something that everybody desires, and it is, freedom is something a lot of people desire. You put an ant in a jar, it's going to want to escape. It's, and I say this a lot, but it's a key thing, because any animal, even in nature, wants to be free. But humans, we have, this thing called conscience, and we have higher thinking abilities to create all these man-made systems of law and politics and religion, etc., that sometimes we might be able to confuse ourselves from that very basic essential need of freedom, or any other basic essential need, that we kind of just lose touch with it, or we make other systems over it, and we start to lose sense of what it really is. So that's why in our previous video we discussed what freedom really is not, and it's just what is freedom. But it's not real freedom. This is real freedom. It's the ability to live your life so as you so choose, just as Aaron said, however, that you're not harming somebody else's freedom, not allowing them to be free. Because if we're equal, if we have the same rights, then we should all be able to express our freedom. And so that's why freedom is not free. You have to understand it and practice it. If somebody tries to attack you or get rid of your freedoms, you have to be able, with your freedom, to defend your freedom. Freedom for freedom, nature for nature. Otherwise, you lose it. Say, use it or lose it. It is your property. Again, we talked about the forms of property, and freedom being that essential that people have to maintain it and be responsible and have ownership over it. Ownership, by definition, self ownership, is the negation of slavery. If you don't want to be a slave, you have to have ownership. And freedom, being the opposite of slavery, goes hand in hand with ownership. In order to be free, you have to have control over yourselves. Otherwise, who's in control of yourself? It's somebody else, and somebody else will take that opportunity as well to manipulate you, use you against your will. You have to be able to be responsible for yourself. And so You must own your own freedom by knowing how to manifest and maintain it. The exercise of rights is the exercise of freedom. Okay. And you may even say that's the right to vices as well, right? Vices are not crimes. They're not wrongdoings. They're things that could potentially harm yourself, but they're not harming other people. Now, some people might say like drinking alcohol or doing certain things could be considered immoral. They might say they're wrong behaviors. But if they're not harming other people, they could get to the point where they affect your reason, where you can affect other people, but you're not directly harming other people. People are wary of these things for certain reasons, very good reasons, right? They're like, yeah, I mean, I should be careful because they see how it affects people's behavior. But that behavior is ultimately the decider as to how somebody is responsible with their own property. Because somebody can drink alcohol, maybe loads of it, and still not do any bad behaviors. But somebody might be really irresponsible and drink a bunch of alcohol and do really bad behaviors. It's just a level of different responsibility of maintaining their ownership. Who is maintaining their ownership better? Who's maintaining what they use better? Who's practicing their rights in a more responsible fashion, because your right is a form of property. So again, you have to be responsible for it.
So when we talked about freedom before, a lot of people can perceive that as, oh, well, it's a proper way to, make sure that, all people get equality. If we have these permits and these, false ways to obtain our freedom, but it's actually an illusion, and instead of asking yourself and having the dominion of yourself to ask yourself and your conscience, if is this behavior, or am I acting in my freedom morally or righteously? That's true freedom. That's real freedom. Whereas if you're asking externally, a master or an authority figure, that's actually servitude, and that's actually slavery. uh and
Because it's such a
essentially,
natural, essential need. So why should you have to
yes.
ask someone to do that? We're making the claim that it is slavery. Like some people might look at it as if like you're just hiring someone, right? Like, oh, I'm hiring them to do this or that. But are they really responsible for you and your rights and your property? And are they telling you what your rights are? Are they claiming ownership over your life and property? Because then it's slavery. It can get to that point if you're not careful, if you're not responsible enough, and you don't want it to get to that point. So we're going to talk about in our next video voluntary interactions and involuntary interactions and how that can sort of add up, and the different forms of slavery that also tie into the involuntary forms and the voluntary forms. This is super important as to getting to the root cause of the problem.